What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com, live on Facebook late in the day on Tuesday. Waiting for some Packers news. Nothing materializing this afternoon, but thought I'd jump on here, as I said I would, every day until the Super Bowl, and see what's on your minds. See what's on the minds of Packers fans, both in Wisconsin, around the country, all over the world, really. Yesterday we had someone from New Zealand check in. So, like I said, thought I'd come on here, stir the pot a little bit, see what's on your minds. Josh, hello. Thanks for joining us. Sup, Don? How are you? Dean. Okay, Facebook changed how comments appear, and I'm freaking out a little bit. Wendy, hello. Oh, my goodness. Hello from London. Nathan, cheers. Thanks for joining us. Alex, hello. Oh, that's a good question. Should they re-sign Devon House? I tend to think they should not. I think they have to move on. They have to improve. I think for what they paid Devon House in 2017, which was a little over $2 million, they probably got what they paid for, and then some. They knew exactly the type of player Devon House was and is, and I think he served his purpose. But I think if the idea is to improve on the defensive side of the ball and become a championship-level defense, you can and must do a lot better opposite Kevin King, provided King comes back from his shoulder injury 100%. I tend to think King will man one outside perimeter spot, and then Demarius Randall will most likely start the year at the star position. Well, no longer the star position because Patton runs a different defense, but in the slot nickel corner role, and then we'll have to find somebody else opposite King. Now, perhaps that somebody is on the roster, maybe Lindsey Pipkins or even Herb Waters jumps up and grabs that spot, but I can't believe that's a plan going into 2018. I think they have to either spend in free agency and or draft a corner. But Devon House, to me, was a good stopgap, but I don't think he should be in their long-term plans. Now, that's just my personal thinking. Brian Gutekunst may see it very differently, and he may bring House back. But like I said, in the NFL, each and every year, each and every day, you're getting better, you're getting worse. And I'm not sure bringing back Devon House falls under the getting better category. Is King good enough to be a number one cornerback? Well, if that's how you're going to design your defense, probably not. If you're going to have a guy who travels with the opponent's number one everywhere he goes, he's probably not there yet. Could he turn into that? Maybe. There's a lot of ball game left in his career, but they don't necessarily need a up in neon lights number one corner. They do need a perimeter corner who can cover, and he did show signs of that throughout his rookie season. But if you look at Pettine's defense in Buffalo, it's not exactly like he had a Revis there. I know a lot of people look at his time in New York with the Jets and say, well, yes, he had Darrelle Revis, but he didn't have Darrelle Revis in Buffalo, and they were still a very good defense. And they didn't have, a Deion Sanders, Darrelle Revis talent on that Buffalo squad. So I don't think King needs to be a quote-unquote shutdown corner, but he does need to improve. There's no doubt about that. Should we try to get Woodson as a DB coach? Daniel from Brazil, what's up, man? The idea that Charles Woodson, a great football mind, obviously an amazing player, Hall of Fame talent, I tend to doubt he would be interested in coaching, having now been in television for a few years. That life can kind of soften you up, so to speak. It's rare, John Gruden is a big-time exception, obviously, a recent one, where you'll go years away from the game into TV and then come back and hit the coaching grind, especially as a position coach, where those are hours, those are long hours. There's a lot of grinding that goes on. You've got a lot less free time on your hands than you do when you're doing television. So I would tend to doubt it, but you never know. We need pass rush. That's the key this offseason. Joe, I would tend to agree. If you read Pete Doherty's column on PackersNews.com this morning, he was talking about Clay Matthews and how they might use him going forward, and how Ted Thompson really kind of dropped the ball there the last 2 years in regards to addressing the Packers pass rush. So Pete and myself both agree. New O-line, says Omar. Well, Omar, they definitely need a new right tackle. Now, they may bring back Brian Bulaga, but he is not going to be ready for the opening of the season. He'll most likely start on the PUP, the physically unable to perform list, which will mean he'll undoubtedly be out the first 6 weeks of the season. Jason Spriggs will be recovering from a dislocated kneecap. They're going to need somebody there to play right tackle. Other than that, I think McCray most likely will step in line at right guard as your starter if they don't bring back Evans, which surely doesn't sound like they will. And the rest of the line is pretty set. I mean, you've got David Bakhtiari, Lane Taylor, and Corey Linsley, who just signed a contract extension. So that right side of the line maybe needs addressing, especially the right tackle position. But other than that, I think they're they're in a good spot. Now, that doesn't mean they can't or won't or shouldn't look at bringing in offensive line help through free agency and or the draft and continue to grow their O-line. But for the most part, they're in a pretty good spot. Travis, Dante Moncrief, that's something I seem to get asked about every single day, and I will continue to say what I've said. I think he would make a lot of sense for the Packers. He's a guy who can play on the perimeter, has speed that they lack at that position. And while he had a down year last year, I think a change of scenery and having Aaron Rodgers throw him the football will definitely shake him up and bring him back into a productive portion of his career. I think, the question that I posed yesterday is, are you banking on Geronimo Allison, picking up the slack, so to speak, on the perimeter? I see a lack of speed and a lack of consistency there that I think Moncrief would help with. Now, he's just one. There are a bunch of free agent wide receivers that the Packers could look at. He's one that makes sense. Of course, the money would have to work. They just invested a whole lot of money into Davante Adams. They're set to pay Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb a bunch of money. I can't imagine they'd make a huge splash at wide receiver in free agency, but if he's still there, say the second wave, third wave of free agency, I think it would make sense for them to take a look. What about Sammy Watkins? I obviously think Sammy Watkins could help the Packers. I do tend to think he's going to get a big-time payday, and the Packers have already laid that out for Davante Adams. When could Rodgers' new deal get done? Good question, Jack. I would suspect prior to the new league year, which will be in March. I would think they'd want to get something done prior to that. Now, I don't doubt that they'll be working on it up until then. Now, will they get it done under the wire? Only if negotiations have kind of already started, because that's a very, very intricate and complicated contract they're going to be working on. I would tend to think it actually gets done probably sometime this summer. Maybe they announce it right before camp starts. That has been their kind of tradition. They've done a bunch of guys like that, David Bakhtiari, Jordy Nelson. Those were announced at the beginning of camp. I do tend to think it gets done this offseason. As for the timing, it could be from anywhere from March till late July. I don't doubt the Packers want to get it done sooner rather than later. The more time marches on, the more leverage goes towards Aaron Rodgers getting even more money than he's already going to get, which is going to be absurdly. It's going to be obviously record-breaking. He'll be the highest-paid player in the history of the league for at least a little while until the next quarterback gets paid. But undoubtedly the Packers would like to get it done sooner rather than later. Will Ted be in Murphy's weekly meetings? No, he will not. Those will be reserved for Mike McCarthy, Brian Gutekunst, and Russ Ball. Does Matt Patricia in Detroit get the Packers' attention? Good question, Don. I talked about that on the radio a little bit this morning. I think he's a good football coach, but history and the NFL is littered with guys who went on from the Bill Belichick tree and went on to dismal failure. I can't think of one off the top of my head who's had success away from Bill Belichick. Josh McDaniels has had great success with Bill twice, and been an utter failure on his own as a head coach. And the list is long in that regard. Whether you're talking, Kansas City, you're talking down in Houston. Although Bill O'Brien is kind of chugging along, he's maybe found something now in Watson with his quarterback, but. Time and time again, whether it's Charlie Weiss, whether the list just goes on of all these guys who have left Bill Belichick and just stumbled along the way. So, like I said, I think Patricia's a really good football coach. He clearly knows the defensive side of the ball, and he's a very, very smart guy. All you got to do is read about his background and see what he studied, and the man obviously knows a lot and is very smart. But a lot of the guys who have left Bill have been very smart, and no one has had success away from Belichick yet. So does it get their attention? No more so than any other new head coach. You got to earn those pelts. You got to put those pelts on the wall as a head coach. And until he does, I think, there's not a whole lot to separate him from anybody else. What's a realistic expectation from the defense this year? Good question. I would say lining up with 11 players, down in and down out. No, I'm half joking, but, one of the first things Mike Pettin responded with when asked about what to expect from his defense was, we are going to be prepared, which I think is a direct response to kind of the discombobulation that we saw on defense in 2017. You can't overstate what a mess Capers' defense was this past season, and it was kind of coming these last couple years, but this year, just down in and down out confusion, just inability to line up, game plans that really didn't seem coherent with who they were facing, being taken advantage of over and over and over again by multiple teams with simple concepts, things like that. I think you will see a cohesion on defense, and I'm not going to say a more simplistic approach, because we've all read about and heard about the complexity Pettin brings, but I do think they will be more prepared and better prepared week in and week out, and I think that will manifest itself throughout the defensive side of the football. Now, as far as numbers-wise, ratings-wise, you could joke there's no place to go but up. They were once again one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, so it's going to be hard to get worse. But yeah, I think you'll see improvement. Now, is it marked? Is it going to be? It's going to catapult them into the top 10. A lot has to play out yet, especially on the personnel side. But I do think, like I said, I think they'll be more prepared and they'll be at least more sound. Now, what that translates to on the field, we'll see. Let's see. Rams like improvements if Packers in Atlanta next February. Is that like a riddle? I think the Rams did a really good job of retooling last year. Obviously, Sean McVay came in and revitalized the offense, and he was smart to hire son of Bum to be his defensive coordinator. I am interested to see what kind of changes Mike McCarthy implements on the offensive side of the ball, because I think he does need, as much as the defense needed a new voice, I think the offense needs kind of airing out, so to speak. And McCarthy seems amiable to that, if he's to be believed from what he said at the podium last week in regards to starting over on the offensive playbook. I don't think that's going to be a complete overhaul on offense, but I do think he is going to try and be open to new ideas and bring new concepts in. And maybe, just maybe, we see a little bit more, a little less static on the offensive side of the ball. These three wide receiver sets, so much spread. It's funny because even when they started to get going and they ran the table, so to speak, last year, you still saw a lot of that. So I don't know how much he shakes that up, but I do think it's overdue a look at the offense. How will the Packers handle the Vikings' number 2 defense next year? Well, by doing a lot of what I was just talking about. They're going to re-overhaul their offense, the offensive side of the playbook, and the teams will undoubtedly look at what Philadelphia did in the NFC Championship game. There's no question there. As I said a couple weeks ago, the whole reason I took Philly in that game is because if you look at the tape in Lambeau Field in Week 16, there are plenty of opportunities there. Brett Hundley just couldn't take advantage of them. In that game where the Packers, basically stubbed their toe all night on offense, there were ample opportunities there. Now, it wasn't all Hundley's fault. There, obviously, Michael Clark has a touchdown go through his hands, and there are other issues there. But for the most part, there were plays there to be made, and Hundley just couldn't make them. Foles made them. So the tape shows you there are vulnerabilities there, and there are ways that they can be exposed. Doug Peterson and Nick Foles just did a great job of exposing them. Not fair to blame Hundley. Well, Ben, like I said, I would say I would give him 65 to 70% of it. I mean, it is the most important position on the offense. He does touch the ball every single play. And there were ample opportunities available to him that he was unable to take advantage of. Now, that said, like you say, it's not all on Hundley, but a good part of it was. Let's see. Packers need to go and get Trey Burton, Philly tight end. Barry, yeah, he's been getting a lot of play here on the old Facebook. I'll give you that. I do think they need to sign somebody in free agency at the tight end position, just because it's really, really difficult for a rookie to come in and make much of a difference. The history of the league will tell you that those jumps from college to pros, especially in the modern game, everything that they're asked to do at that position, especially in Green Bay, it's a lot. And even the most talented guys have trouble early on in their NFL careers. Now, maybe they can help you down the line their rookie year, but more often than not, you're basically redshirting a guy at the tight end spot, which means you have to go and spend a little bit in free agency to kind of bolster a position where the Packers, frankly, they need some help. They've got one guy signed next year in Lance Kendricks. And outside of that, the cupboard is bare. So, yeah, I do think they will look at somebody in free agency. I don't know if it's, in Philadelphia specifically, but it's definitely somebody that they should have their eye on. Hayden up for grabs at cornerback. He's going to get paid, though. I don't think the Packers are going to spend big money at corner, but maybe. I mean, I think they probably have to spend more than they spent last year on Devon House, which was $2-point-something million, which is way down on the pay scale when you look at the free agents that signed last offseason. But I don't think they're going to break the bank, and I think Hayden's going to get paid. Matt, what's up, man? Do you think McCarthy did a good job developing Hundley? That's a very good question. My question, what I always come back to on Hundley is, I think McCarthy did what he could with the 5th round pick that was handed to him, but all you needed to do was look at that first game against New Orleans to know that McCarthy didn't trust him. And whether that's the player or the coaching, I can't tell you. But when the guy's been in your system for 3 years and then he finally gets a chance to start and you basically design a game plan to hide him, that tells you what the coach thinks of the player, in my eyes. And I think, Hundley, mostly if you go back and read the scouting reports, he's still kind of that player. He's erratic. His accuracy is not great. He's a good runner. He's an athletic guy. He can get out on the edge and make some things happen, but mostly those things that are happening are with his legs and not with his arm. So I think McCarthy has probably done what he could with what he was given. But I also think that McCarthy didn't do a great job of kind of designing things and leaning into Hundley's strengths. I think there was a little bit too much of trying to get Hundley to do things designed for their offense rather than moving that offense and moving it towards Hundley's strengths. I thought they should have used a whole lot more read option, got him running a lot more, but that just wasn't in the cards apparently. But yeah, so it's a complicated answer. Like I said, I did find it interesting when McCarthy noted at his end-of-year press conference that I think he even said in their exit interview with Hundley, he mentioned he thought Hundley should have been better prepared, meaning the player, not like the coaching, not Alex Van Pelt's job, etc., that Brett Hundley wasn't as prepared as he should have been as a player. That's, to me, that's a giant red flag. That a guy maybe wasn't lighting it up in the classroom. Maybe when the time came and McCarthy was like, okay, here we go, we're going to roll, and Hundley maybe was struggling with certain concepts or coverages or what have you. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, McCarthy's never going to say publicly what that is. But that tells you that maybe Hundley wasn't 100% in his playbook or 100% preparing himself. So, and I can only go by what McCarthy has said. I don't know. I'm not in the meeting rooms. I can tell you. Why did Callahan not get opportunities? Nick, that's a great question. I tend to think they determined that Callahan wasn't going to be able to move the offense. more than anything else. I think they knew Hundley they put all this time in him. They invested the draft pick in him. They were going to ride and die with him. Now, obviously, that lasted right up until the final couple of series there in Detroit in Week 17. But I said for weeks they should put Callahan in. I'll never understand, other than the fact that Mike McCarthy is one of the most stubborn human beings I've ever encountered in my entire life. That's about the only logical explanation I can give you. If City comes available, we'll take a look. I saw this before. I saw this morning. I think it was Acme Packing Company. Somebody had blogged about if Josh Sitton became available, the Packers should take a look. That is never going to happen while Mike McCarthy is still in the building. One of the big reasons the Packers moved on is because Mike McCarthy was sick of dealing with Josh Sitton. Obviously, Ted Thompson was as well, but McCarthy was the driving force behind that. And I'd be absolutely shocked if McCarthy allowed him back into his locker room. Mike's stubbornness regularly hurts the team. Yeah, Eric, I would say he has hurt the team on occasion. I wouldn't say it regularly does, but I certainly think he is overtly stubborn. Let's see. News on 42. Nothing yet, Troy. It's all quiet. I would think something would, if something's going to get done, it'll probably happen right before free agency starts. That's how Russ Ball tends to operate, and that's provided that they want to bring him back. We don't know for sure. That's obviously Gutekunst's call, but as far as making the numbers work, that would be Ball, and they tend to kind of go radio silent until there's a deadline approaching, which will be in about a month and a half. Let's see. Will Rodgers need to change the way he plays as he gets older? I mean, a bit, if it comes down to not being quite as mobile and fleet of foot. But as they always, as everyone always says, he does get outside the pocket and make big plays happen. They seem to happen with less regularity now than they used to. But he does still make things happen when he breaks contain, get outside the pocket. I do think you will see kind of a concerted effort to not rein him in, but to try and maybe get the running game going a little bit more, maybe ask a little less of him as the years go on, just because, as you say, he'll be getting older, and they don't want to put him at injury risk. But, it is a risk-reward situation where they have to kind of contend with the fact that a big part of their explosiveness on offense comes from Rodgers' style of play. So it's a delicate balancing act. That's all I'll say. Let's see. Favorite QB in this draft class? Oh, I don't know. I think they all have upside and they all have some faults. I love Baker Mayfield as a competitor. If I'm the GM, I'm taking Baker just because I like how fiery he is. But I get why people would take Rosen and Darnold and all these guys. Like I said, I would take Baker myself. What happened to Ha seemed to fall off a cliff halfway through 16? That's a great question and a great mystery as well. It is something that they've got to address, and they've got to get him trending back upward because they can't continue to rely on a guy who was as inconsistent as he was in 2017. Why does it bother people so much that I don't have a backdrop other than like doors and pictures and lamps? I don't understand, man. The content's the same no matter what's behind me, dudes. What do you think about Ronda Rousey in WWE? Jimmy? I don't. Will McCarthy force Rodgers not go pass all the time? Yeah, that's a tricky one. I tend to think this, I said this I think last week, this kind of overhauling of the offensive playbook does present an opportunity for them to, if not, focus on the run more, it should give them an opportunity to take some of the kind of, I don't want to say pressure because I think Rodgers thrives under pressure, but I think it's a good chance for them, or a good spot for them to ask a little less of Rodgers. I mean, they have become so Rodgers-centric. You saw how the offense really fell apart without him this year. I think what they need to do is become a little bit more multiple on offense and ask a little less of their superstar quarterback. And by doing so, they will maybe possibly lean on the running game a little bit more, try and use some more concepts that get guys open freely and easily, rub routes, pick routes, things like that, that, you know, they don't ask so much of your quarterback and your wide receiving core to win one-on-ones and isolation routes, which essentially leads to him having to break contain and move out of the pocket and thereby opening himself up to injury. But I don't think the RPOs and the check with me's are going to change drastically. I do think Rodgers will still have a great deal of control at the line of scrimmage. And, you know, as frustrating as it can be to see them maybe get pass happy all the time, for the most part, you go back and you look at the tape and Rodgers is making the right calls. You know, if he's got a light box, he's going to run. If they stack the line or the box, then he's going to throw it. And generally, that's smart football, and that's what you want to do. Now that said, there comes a time when you want to pound it. You want to get your running back going. You want to get your offensive line firing off the ball rather than dropping back every play. So that's one of those things I think they need to look at while they overhaul their offensive playbook. Love the background. Thanks, Denny. Aaron won't run. Randall, that's not true. Aaron absolutely will run the ball. Like I said, if he sees a light box, it shows up on tape time and time again. He will check to a run, or he'll give the ball on an RPO. If the numbers dictate it, he's going to do it. Let's see. Do I see... Should the Packers try and get Clowney? Whew. I don't know, Trace. I think that would be a little rich for their blood. Clowney, as far as I know, I don't think he's a free agent. And I think that would take King's ransom to pry him away from Houston. Tell Mike McCarthy to be nicer to you. Oh, man. Mike is fine to me. He gets upset because I ask scheme questions, and he doesn't appreciate that. But, you know, man, I'm talking football. I want to know. People want to know. Get Fumagalli. They need tight ends. I mean, he would make a lot of sense in Green Bay. But, you know, it all depends on how the board falls and where he's available. Draft or free agent for right tackle. Peter, I tend to think they'll probably look at the draft. Maybe they look at someone like Justin Pugh, who can play a bunch of different positions, but could play right tackle for a little bit. I do tend to think they'll look at the draft, though. They've had a lot of success, especially on the third day, drafting along the offensive line. But you know, we'll see. I do think they need to do something there to bolster the position, but whether it's going to be draft or free agency, that remains to be seen. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. I'll be back tomorrow in lieu of any other breaking news. In the meantime, like I said, make sure you're checking PackersNews.com. Until tomorrow, I'll talk to you soon.